Hi guys, and welcome to the April garden tour. This is Seed to Plate channel. My name is Brooke. If you've never been here before, grab a beverage or a cup of coffee because we really here like to take a slow walk through the gardens on the monthly garden tours to talk all things that are happening in the garden. I am an urban gardener and a suburban gardener. I have a garden in the back of my rental house in Austin, Texas. We're in zone 8B. I also have a 10-foot by 20-foot community garden plot where I garden as well. So these garden tours end up being the tale of two gardens. In this garden tour, we're going to talk about what's growing in my backyard for the first half, and then we'll talk about what's growing at the community plot the second half. So, like I said, grab a cup of coffee or any kind of beverage. We are going to take a very slow, detailed walk through the garden to tell you about everything that's happening here in Austin, Texas. Okay, y'all, so it is very dreary. I unfortunately could not wait for the weather to get nicer because I also have a full-time job. So we are doing this garden tour before working hours so that I can do this part of it. And it just happened to be really rainy and gray and gross. Start over here in the herb and flower garden. Over here, this is just a regular mojito mint plant. I have it in a pot because mint is a big bully, and I'll show you what I mean here in a second because I keep peppermint in my garden, which it's still all part of the mint family. So mint here, we have lemon balm, which I use to make tea, and then back here, these beautiful plants. This flower just bloomed. This is a Mexican torch sunflower. I bought these seeds because the flowers said they were both drought and heat resistant, which we get both of those things very much so in the summer here in Texas. So I'm really excited to have these beautiful flowers right here, and I could not believe how vibrant red this flower was when it opened yesterday. That's what all of these are right here. And then we have some curly parsley. And curly parsley is mostly just a garnish. It's not that great to eat if we're all being honest. And the basil is really starting to take off. I need to trim it. So if you cut the tops off of basil, it will actually bush out more and you'll get more basil. So this is probably the best it's looked so far. Now this over here is why you don't plant mint in your garden. This is peppermint, and I love peppermint, so I'm able to kind of keep it under control because I cut it almost every day to make tea. But in general, I mean, this mint plant started right here, and now it's kind of just really taken over. And then we've got regular flat leaf parsley here, and a rosemary bush that I had to replace. I had a much larger one there, but we had a freeze in February that killed it. And then this is all cinnamon basil, and this must not have that much root room because it is starting to put off little flowers, which last year my basil did not put off flowers until probably August. So that basil, I think it's suffering a little bit. I just keep plucking out the flowers and then it'll just keep growing. And then finally, what's gonna fill in here are these zinnias. I might have to pull a couple of them up once they get a little bigger and just replant them more in the middle. But these are all gonna be zinnias and flowers, and so hopefully by the May garden tour, this looks much more filled out than it was, but hopefully by the May garden tour, it will be even more filled out. And then over here, we have the two blueberry bushes. This is the first year I've had both of them, so no blueberries yet, but that is a-okay. From what I understand about blueberries, they need somewhat of an acidic fertilizer, which I have not done for these yet. So I think my next move on the blueberries is to get a really good acidic fertilizer and get them fertilized. So this tomato right here, this is a Brad's Atomic Grape. And this tomato was a rescue tomato that I planted in a vlog a couple of weeks ago. And Brad's Atomic Grape is a really cool variety that I didn't actually have seeds for, but I'm really excited that I got it for free. And so it's just living in this pot for now until it gets transplanted somewhere else. This right here, this little delicate thing, this is a Hatch green chili that I direct sowed. Oh, and there's another one coming up. So This I direct sowed probably a couple of weeks ago, and it's just now starting to come up. Peppers are weird to germinate. If you have issues germinating peppers, you are not alone. Peppers need a lot of heat to germinate, and they also just take a lot longer, so I'm not surprised that these took so long. One seed that I am still waiting to germinate are some Scotch bonnet peppers. We'll see about those. This right here is the heirloom tomato bed. So this grouping of 4 right here, these are all cherry tomatoes. We have a pear tomato, a large red cherry. This one is a sunrise bumblebee, which is an orange stripe, and then behind it is a Berry's crazy cherry, which is a big cluster of yellow cherry tomatoes. And then in this middle section, these are all of my heirloom slicers. So we've got black Krim here in the front. Behind we've got yellow Brandywine. This is a red Brandywine, which actually has a couple of little tomato babies. And then behind is a Cherokee purple that is just freaking covered in blossoms. So these are all of my heirloom slicers. This back here is a newly established bed based on a no-dig method. So I have a whole video on it. I can tag it here. But basically the no-dig method is where you're trying to disrupt the soil as least as possible by giving it compost and covering it to suppress the weeds. So far I've been really impressed, and these plants are doing really, really well. So that's kind of how that goes. And I'm also doing an experiment where all of the tomatoes that you see in this bed, I'm also growing in 20-gallon grow bags to see if I can get a similar yield, a better yield, whatever the case may be. So doing a few different experiments here with the heirloom tomatoes. And interplanted with my tomatoes, I have different varieties of marigolds. These don't look too good yet. These marigolds, on the other hand, these marigolds are called African crackerjack marigolds. They're massive. I'm a little bit nervous that they're going to create a humidity problem with my tomatoes, but we'll see how that pans out. Tomatoes can be pretty susceptible to like blight, which is a bacterial infection, which happens if they don't have enough like air about them. But the reason we interplant marigolds with our tomatoes and other crops is because they actually keep away pests, and it's a natural way to keep away pests. So I had these marigolds I started from seed and planted when they were big. These marigolds I direct sowed, and they just got so choked out by the tomato plants growing that they're like super tiny. But I'm kind of happy that they're small. I don't really want them to be this big. So that's definitely a learning moment for me. But this section of the heirloom tomato bed has all of my paste tomatoes, if you will. So we've got Paul Robeson in the front, which I've heard is like an amazing tomato for sauces, and it's got like a smoky umami flavor. Back there we've got our San Marzanos. These are a standard Roma tomato. And then in front here are Rutgers tomatoes, and Rutgers tomatoes are actually what Campbell's soup uses in tomato soup. And this Roma plant, I mean, this thing is almost as tall as me, and I'm 5 feet tall. And I've been having to like aggressively prune the suckers. So like, this is a sucker. It lives in the armpit of the branches. And like, I just pruned and this thing wasn't here. So this Roma tomato was seeds that I got in a packet from my boyfriend for Christmas a couple of years ago, and these plants are just freaking tanks. It's crazy. But here's also a good example of a sucker that completely got out of control. So that was a sucker that I missed, and now it's huge, and I'm a little nervous that if I take it out, it's going to really negatively affect the plant, and I'll show you why I think that here in a few minutes. So here's the start of the grow bag tomatoes. So these are all going to be the same varieties that I've got in here in the ground. This is the San Marzano. This one's a Paul Robeson. So in terms of growth, I think the growth thus far is similar, and I filled these grow bags in a vlog, and so probably a third of the way I filled them with leaves, like dead leaves to decompose, and then I used
cow manure, and I also used compost, and that's what these are filled with. So this is just the start of them. There's way more over in what I call Tomato Alley. And then here's kind of like, I inadvertently made this like a purple section. So these are black print snapdragons that are getting ready to bloom. They're getting close, probably in the next couple of days. And then I've just got some regular like French lavender, nothing overly exciting. So this should all bloom here very soon. These are more Mexican torch sunflowers that I just needed to throw into a grow bag. Here's where I put the Scotch bonnet peppers, and I'm seeing like no activity here, but maybe I just need to be more patient. And then this bed right here, these are summer squash, well, all kinds of squash and green beans. So this is squash and beans. And then these beautiful things are my Alaska red shade nasturtiums that are blooming, and the leaves are variegated, and this is just like one of the most fun, unique plants I've ever grown. It's just so pretty. These flowers are edible because this is a nasturtium. We don't eat them because I just really want all pollinator friendly things out here to attract some pollinators, but these nasturtiums are beautiful, and they've done really well in this bed. So we have Royal Burgundy bush beans here on this half, another type of green bean on this half that didn't germinate super great. And then we've got some zucchini plants. This is either a yellow squash or a Romanesco squash. Same thing here, I forgot to label them. And then those two are butternut squash. They're tiny and not doing that great. Those two are acorn squash. Certainly one thing I learned about squash is that I think in our zone and our climate, it's certainly better to direct sow it because a lot of these were transplants from plants whose roots had been super stunted, and they're just like not looking that great. So, you live and learn. And here we just have more marigolds. These were just bought from a flat from like Home Depot. Nothing special, but they should get pretty, big and fill out. This is, I believe, a type of African violet that's really beautiful. This was my lone surviving sugar snap pea from this crazy freeze that we had in February. We have a very short window to grow sugar snap peas here in Texas because it gets hot really fast and they don't really love the heat. So I just kind of, I just some days come out here and have like a little garden snack, and that's very nice. And then here on this arch trellis are my cucumbers, some of my cucumbers. We have two dogs. We have a Boxer Pit Bull mix and we have a Great Dane Mastiff mix, and we give our dogs cucumbers. We give our dogs a lot of veg out of the garden just as like treats. But Lana, our Great Dane Mastiff, kept eating the cucumber seedlings, and finally the second time she did it, I broke open a stem and the plant actually smells like cucumbers. So I'm not surprised that she ate them, but she has left these alone, thank God, because I was not going to plant them again. This was my third planting of cucumbers, and I just decided if she ate them again, we just weren't having cucumbers this year. These cucumbers will climb up this arch, and only two survived on this side, the third one didn't, so whatever, not a big deal. And then here's some yellow snapdragons that survived the freeze. This is a Montauk daisy that's coming back that I rescued last year, and then just a few annuals. And then this bed is my garlic, so I lost a few here from a squirrel digging stuff up, but this is all garlic that I planted in October that still won't be ready until probably like June. But I feel very encouraged because the stalks are getting nice and thick. So I'm feeling encouraged, I'm feeling good, but certainly, the whole garlic thing has been quite the process. More marigolds in front for pest control. And then here, these are also some cucumbers, but these guys I just direct sowed in the ground, and the other ones that are bigger were transplants. So I believe all of these cucumbers are market more. These ones might be straight 8, but truly I don't remember. And then over here, these are Armenian white cucumbers that I direct sowed. So the Armenian white cucumber is actually more of a melon, but the seeds look just like cucumbers and they look a lot like cucumbers. So these will grow up this side of the trellis, these cucumbers will grow up this side of the trellis, and hopefully nobody eats my cucumbers anymore. This is just a Gerber daisy that's really beautiful, that seems to like this spot pretty well. And then this is my onion bed. Now, my onions, because of the way our sun is with these trees that are not in our backyard, the sun was getting blocked here. The sun's now moved, so the onions are getting a lot more sun now. I planted these in January and it's now April. So some of them, like the ones that are in this grow bag that were getting more sun, these are starting to like bulb and actually create a pretty good size onion. Some of these, especially, they just haven't really taken off the way I thought they were going to. And some of them are bulbing, you know, like this little guy. I'm not sure that he's actually going to get much bigger. So yeah, the onions have been a bit of an experiment. It's my first time growing them. And then I've just got a little bit of chamomile. Here's another grow bag tomato in the 20-gallon pot. He's doing really well. This is a pear tomato, I believe, and it's putting off lots of really good-looking tomatoes. It's just really tall, and I think it's because in this spot, it gets like kind of dappled lighting. So it probably got almost a little leggy, but it's doing well. It's sturdy. And then in here, in the green stalk, I need to finish filling this out with plants because I just lost a lot of my bare root strawberries. And this is the first year for these strawberries, so it's not like the most impressive gardening thing, but I need to just replace some of the strawberries because it just looks really empty right now. And then this is a Fiesta blend nasturtium that I just wanted to put something in this pot, and these are some type of zinnia. I'm not sure which ones I planted. And then in here, we have Tomato Alley. So these are all the same tomatoes that I planted in the heirloom bed that I just showed you. And this system, I'm using the Florida weave. So these are concreted buckets that I put into a hole in the ground. And that's how we're keeping these stakes nice and sturdy. But these are all the same tomatoes, same method, you know, dead leaves in the bottom, and then cow manure, and then compost. This is a Berry's Crazy Cherry. Now, one of the things that these tomatoes are most known for are these like crazy huge clusters of tomatoes. And we are getting a few tomatoes on this plant, but like, I've never seen anything like this with like these massive clusters. So I'm pretty pumped, and these little clusters seem to be coming up like everywhere. So pretty excited for that one. So these are all cherries, and then of course some of them I forgot to label, so I don't actually know what they are. It looks like there's a tomato in this one, and yeah, so these all seem pretty happy, and so far I'm pretty happy with the Florida weave. Now this is the tomato I was telling you guys about earlier. This tomato right here was a yellow brandywine. I ruined this tomato by something that I did. So when you're pruning suckers, if it's a bigger sucker, you really need to have trimmers or pruners or scissors or something sharp, because you can scar the plant and then you can allow disease to get in. And you also want to make sure that what you're pruning is actually the sucker and not the main stem. So what I did to this plant was I thought I was pulling a sucker. I'm pretty sure now I pulled the main stem, and if you pull the main stem of a tomato, it's either going to bush out or it's just going to stop growing. Well, this one stopped growing. So not only did I pull the main stem, but I completely scarred the plant and it's just stopped growing. You can see where it happened. It's got this like just really ugly scab on it. And it's truly just stopped growing. It was growing really well, and then it just hasn't gotten any bigger than this, and the other tomatoes next to it are starting to grow like a lot. So I'm actually gonna pull that one out fairly soon, and that's where I'm gonna put the Brad's Atomic Grape. So this is my just word of caution. When you're pruning your tomatoes, just be super duper sure that you are pruning the sucker and not the main stem, and use something sharp. So that is everything that's going on in the backyard garden right now, other than I put my fiddle leaf outside and he got sunburned. He'll be okay. So I did want to just chat really quickly before we go over to the community plot about a spring garden. So I live in zone 8B. There's only 10 zones, so it's hot here, and we don't really have that much of a winter. Like, we had a really weird winter this year where we had like this epically huge like winter storm and freeze, but that's not really normal for us. So usually you can get, you know, a lot of spring plants, like plants that would be considered spring in the north, like lettuces and cabbages and a lot of root vegetables. You can get those to grow here through the winter and even like into March once it starts getting kind of warm. So there is an opportunity to have a spring garden here. We had this crazy storm that killed everything in February, so I didn't really have the opportunity for a spring garden. Last year we had a spring garden where, you know, we were eating kale and collards and green beans, and you know, there was like a transitional season because we just didn't have all this freaky crazy weather. This year we had all this freaky crazy weather, and so we have not eaten out of the garden since January, which is very strange for us. We're usually eating out of the garden at least a little bit, you know, most of the year. So I personally am very anxious to start eating out of the garden again, and I probably could have planted things after the freeze in February, but the problem is with where we are in Texas, it goes from like 60s, like 50s, 60s, you know, and not necessarily freezing, but like this like very mild temperature. It goes from that to 90 within maybe a month. So if I would have planted things that were like 3-month crops in the middle of February, let's say it was a 90-day crop, that would have taken us through May, and it would have been way too hot. Everything would have bolted, it wouldn't have had time to develop. So this was definitely a weird year. Most people will plant a spring garden of, you know, lettuces and, you know, all of these like cold hardy things that are good in the cold. You know, a lot of people can plant all that stuff. That was not the case for us this year. But I miss it. I certainly miss eating out of the garden. So it's pretty close though. I will say though, with tomatoes, like, tomatoes are weird because like you start like getting these little tomatoes and you're like, oh, those are cute. It's still gonna be like 2 months before you get to eat that tomato. It is like, it feels like once you get a tomato on the plant and they're green, it feels like they stay green for 100 years. It feels like they're never gonna ripen, you're never gonna be able to eat them. So I almost want to bet that the next garden tour that we do in May, those tomatoes are gonna be big, but they're probably still not gonna be ready to eat. So we usually end up, if I plant our tomatoes in March, we end up with tomatoes. Last year it was in June was when we got our earliest tomatoes. So, you know, it's all just kind of crazy. But that is everything that's happening in the backyard garden. I will take you to the community plot and show you everything that's happening there. That's where all of my peppers, and I have a few more tomatoes that were just like extra, but that's where all of my peppers are. So stay tuned. We're gonna go to the community plot and talk all things peppers and flowers and herbs and tomatillos. Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the plot. Now, this is my community plot. It's 10 foot by 20 foot, and
this is my community garden. I love this place and I hope to be here for a very long time. So here in this bed, I've got all of my peppers and tomatoes and my tomatillos. Also, it's gonna be really weedy in here. It's been raining like crazy for a few days, and these spring rains really make everything here in Central Texas just freaking explode. So this garden is full of beautiful green things, and let's go see all of the beautiful green things here. Okay guys, so starting in this corner, this is where we always start. Here's my lavender. Now this lavender got taken out by our freeze, and I just trimmed it back all the way down to the bottom, and it has come back like bigger and more beautiful than ever. This is Italian flatleaf parsley that's actually going to seed. This Italian flatleaf parsley has been here since last spring. It has never diminished. So the fact that it's going to seed is honestly totally fine with me. I've been swimming in parsley for a very long time. These are my tomatillos. So these are Rio Grande tomatillos that I got from Baker Creek, and they are just freaking loaded down with tomatillos. Now tomatillos will grow inside of these little things. I'm trying to see if there's any down here that might, nope. So these are all tomatillos. I've tried to wall them off the best I can, but they just take over if you're not careful. So this is only 3 plants, and we're looking forward to some great tomatillos this year. And also I love planting tomatillos because they take the bugs. So you'll see all these little holes. These guys don't really bother tomatillos, so it's just kind of, it works for some organic pest control. You just divert them to another plant and then they leave the other stuff alone. So then we've just got flowers. This is all cilantro that desperately needs to be taken down. It's like, so I just pulled that cilantro off of this pepper plant. It was like completely eclipsing that pepper plant, which is not good for the plant. So then we've just got some thyme that's going to flower and some just ornamental flowers. This is peppermint, which I need to cut back because it's jumping over into my neighbor's plot, and it's also jumping into the main plot. So that's peppermint that needs to be taken care of. This is some spearmint that came back from last year, and then lots of weeds. More thyme that came back from last year. This is a lonely tomatillo, and I actually didn't know this. I didn't know this, but tomatillos actually like to be planted together. They like to have friends. And so I planted this guy because he was just an extra, and he definitely has not done as well as the other ones that are in the corner. So if you plant tomatillos, plant more than one because they really like having friends. As we move down here, we've got some zinnias that are coming up, which I'm really pumped about. I don't remember what I planted where. I just brought a bunch of packets of zinnias one day and spread them all around, so it'll be nice. And then here along the border, we've got the oregano. This oregano is freaking out of control. I mean, I keep pulling it and pulling it and pulling it, and it just will not let up. This is a reseeded calendula that will be coming up soon. More thyme, more flowers. Some of these flowers are looking a little rough. And then this beautiful thing, I actually haven't seen this since it bloomed. This was actually from a zinnia that I had here last year that was this beautiful like mango, like salmon color. I have no idea what it's called. I got it from like Home Depot, but I'm so happy it came back because they were just freaking beautiful. And then I have some sage that's doing really well. More zinnias coming up, and that's what's going on in the border. Now this is where we get into a lot of the weeds, quite literally. This stupid grass is like the bane of my existence. So over here, this is an orange bell pepper, and it's just starting to flush on the bottom. So last year I had a lot of trouble with bell peppers, and this year I'm not really sure what I did, to be honest, but maybe I just got better seed or who knows, but my bell peppers seem to actually be a really good size. Last year they were just so tiny. So I'm really pumped about that. And then we have just a bunch of peppers. Oh, and they're getting little babies on them. That's so exciting. That looks like a jalapeno. I do have markers on these ones, but lots of blossoms, lots of blooms. This one took a while to take off.
This is called a nata pino, or I'm sorry, this is a habanada, I believe. And a habanada is like a not spicy habanero that I was really excited to grow. But these plants started off just like so dinky and tiny. And then we have another bell pepper sneaking in over here, although it looks like it might have a little bit of a rough spot on it. I might need to pick that guy. These are called King of the North bell peppers, and they're meant to actually harvest early. They're supposed to be planted in northern regions. I was trying to get ahead of the heat. So these are just all peppers. It looks like this guy fell over. So some of these peppers are just, ooh, I'm gonna have to fix that. I put some of these bamboo stakes to just give them some support, but clearly the weight of the plant overtook the bamboo stake. So lots of plants. We've already harvested some shishito peppers, which have been really, really prolific so far. And shishito peppers look like this. They're really delicious, like blistered, thrown in some sauce. They're really, really tasty. And then we just have a couple of like empty spots of stuff that didn't quite make it. But I'm so beyond pleased. I am so beyond pleased with how these peppers look, and I'm not sure like that I did anything exceptional. I did pinch the first blossoms, and I did start them from seed, and I did start them nice and early. But truthfully, other than just properly amending my soil and mulching and making sure they got watered in a timely fashion, I don't know that there was like a secret to growing peppers. So granted, I haven't harvested that much yet, so maybe I'll be singing a different tune at some point when harvest time comes, but as of now, I'm extremely happy with how this like little field of peppers is looking. Very, very pleased. These are all tomatoes. Now, I will say these tomatoes are not as elaborately cared for as my tomatoes that I have growing in my backyard. And you can tell that because I have not pruned them quite as much. And I also have just allowed the suckers to get out of control. So these tomatoes are kind of like bonus tomatoes for me, and I'm kind of just letting them do their thing, honestly. And some of them are looking, you know, a little bit rough, and some of them just are looking a little strange, if I'm being perfectly honest. But they've all got fruit on them, and they're growing well. So maybe I'll call these my my limited intervention tomatoes because they just, I haven't been doing that much with them, truthfully. Oh, there's a snail. I don't think you can see him, but he's pooping on my leaves. So I just haven't really been doing too much with these tomatoes, and they're growing and they're producing tomatoes. Are they going to be my best producers? Maybe not, but maybe they will be. And a lot of them I didn't mark either. So, you know, that seems to be a theme with me. I will say though, this one is probably my best looking Roma tomato, and I'm a little mad at myself that I put this stupid cage around it, because last year when I grew this, I mean, it got 7-8 feet tall, and this thing is like 4 feet tall. So, but it's already completely freaking loaded with tomatoes. It's crazy. And this is just a standard Roma tomato. So this just goes to show, I think when you start gardening, when you start watching gardening channels on YouTube, there's like this myth that like you have to get like the seeds from these few companies, you know, like, and you have to do it this way and you have to do it this way. These seeds were from Amazon. They're a couple years old. I have no idea when they were packaged. I have no idea where they're from. But at the end of the day, it's food, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's still food that's gonna feed you that you grew yourself. And so if you're new to gardening, or even if you just need this reminder as like a seasoned gardener, your seeds or your plants, like, they don't have to come from somewhere special. Like, we're not being purists here. Most of the people in this garden, in this community garden, buy their plants. I am one of the few people that starts them from seed, and it's just because I really enjoy the process, or the punishment, not sure which yet. But these are just regular old Roma tomato seeds. They're not anything special, they're not anything crazy, and they're going to feed us and nourish us. And truthfully, at the end of the day, isn't that like what we're here for and what we're concerned about? So that's just kind of my encouragement, my message to you, to like not get too hung up on the semantics of, you know, seeds and open pollinated and organic and all this stuff. Like, is it cool? Is it important? Yes. Do I grow all of those types of things? Absolutely. Is it gonna stop me from growing something like this that's big and beautiful and productive? Absolutely not. Something that I shared in my garden tour in my backyard was that I kind of ruined that tomato by pruning the sucker. So this one I have left, and it just turned into 2 stems down there. Now I could probably at this point cut this one off, but it's already got blossoms on it, and like, is it necessary? Probably not. I probably will come in and trim off leaves like this that are just like literally pointing down and touching the ground. But you know, this is this is kind of like my wild array of tomatoes that they just don't get as perfectly pruned, if you will. And that's definitely something to consider too. Like, I think community plots and community gardens are an amazing way to get started gardening. I would not know as much as I do now if I didn't have this community garden. With that being said, depending on how you want to garden, you know, if you want to prune your tomatoes aggressively like I do in my backyard, you got to check that almost every day. Community garden might not be conducive for that for you. I live 15 minutes away from this community garden, and I don't get here every day. I'm lucky if I get here every other day or a couple times a week. So with that, I just have come to like find some acceptance in stuff like this, where it's like, yes, these tomatoes are not my ideal tomato, right? My ideal tomato is in my backyard, and that's very perfectly trimmed and pruned and cared for. These aren't that, and it's just because I don't live around the corner from here. It's not in my backyard. And so that's something to consider if you're looking or thinking about getting a community garden plot. It's very important to think about, you know, how often you're going to want to get in the car and get here. I mean, I also find this place is a complete refuge, so I come here all the time, but some people aren't like that. Some people plant mostly flowers because they only want to come here once or twice a week. It's just all very dependent on who you are and your lifestyle and what you want out of your garden. Rant over. Okay, y'all, I'm sorry that the community garden plot tour was brief, if you will, but it's pretty wet out here, and I'm just kind of waiting for it to start downpouring again. This was the 10-minute window that I had to do this. So I really appreciate you guys watching. The traffic noise just got very loud, but it's what you get in an urban garden downtown Austin. So thank you so much for watching, and please leave any comments, questions, anything you have down below. I think the comment section is such a great place for people to learn from each other, not even from me. So thanks again for watching. Happy gardening, and we will see you next week.